Saltwater History, episode 150. Richard, we got a special Thanksgiving treat the Tuesday before Thanksgiving. Who do we got on?
We said we are going to have big guests coming up, and none bigger than this guy right here that's appearing with us. This is Takoa Prince Coleman. So, TK says that the favorite part as he watches our show is when I am able to riff on how disappointed I am with people near and dear to my heart during the segment Meanwhile in Oak Park. But I have something of a secret to reveal. My favorite part of many of the at least guest podcasts is when I'm able to construct and then read these bios. So I'm gonna get him to blush a little bit, I hope, and enjoy the riff here. 2 score and 7 years ago or thereabouts, the wonderful matriarch and patriarch of the Coleman family mutually decided to give their newborn son the pranom Tekoa, from the Hebrew meaning trumpet, and from the verb tekwa, meaning to bring forth with a sudden force. Anyone who has been blessed simply to acquaint themselves with TK knows how appropriate the name. How much more so those graced to know him and call him as a friend. TK grew up in Chicago, attended college at Western Michigan University, and then went on to co-found Praxis, the now famous apprenticeship program and alternative to traditional undergraduate studies. If that were not enough, TK is an author, a nationally recognized speaker whose success in popularizing and promoting entrepreneurship advanced the mission of FEE, that is, the Foundation for Economic Freedom, for nearly a decade. Since 2022, TK has gained even more deserved fame as the co-host of the wildly successful The Minimalist podcast, where he continues in his noble mission as the advocate for liberty, personal happiness, and fulfillment. Most importantly, though, as the son of a preacher man, TK has been a man on fire with love of and faith in God for his entire life. All of that translated into his entrance into the Catholic Church just a couple of years ago now. So, Mr. Trumpet, my dear friend, and Charlie's too, we're blessed to have you on.
I wish I had a trumpet sound effect that I could do.
We can throw it in
Whoa,
there.
whoa, whoa. That's more trombone. Hey, how do you do a trumpet sound effect?
Oh man, thank you so much for that flattering introduction. So man, let me give you your flowers, brother. Let me give these flowers right back to you. I won't wait for the funeral, man. I'll do it right now. I love I love your passion, man. And I love your knowledge of history. And I've learned not to think of fame as the kind of thing that any of us do or don't deserve, because that just presupposes too much about fame as virtue, fame as intrinsically valuable thing. But I certainly do hope that more people get to hear you, more people tune in to you, and that there's just more exposure for you in your future. Because I think when it comes to your love for liberty, your knowledge for history, your uncompromising commitment to principle, and the way in which every election cycle, when people fall subject to that mass hypnosis that takes place, where everything that they said about their love for liberty just flies out of the window, when the peer pressure kicks in, you stand by those principles, man, and you still stand in resistance to the crowd, and you speak truth, even if it ticks people off. We need people like that. Sometimes I envy you because I wish I could be as angry and as mean as you are. But I'm working on it. I'm working on it. But I
Cut to the
appreciate you,
quick.
man.
Cut to the quick, right? All right. Speaking of cut to the quick, my saintly and kind mother, whenever the discussion comes up about I'm going to talk to you, or I'm going to have a conversation with you, or we're going to have you on, or whatever it is, she always says, "What was in the water back then? What was in the water back at Divine Infant Jesus Grade School in Westchester, Illinois, that produced TK Coleman and Elizabeth Robinson and Joey
Oh,
Rainey
oh,
and Elise Williams and all
oh.
these amazing people who were on fire with both their faith, but also this passion for the truth and goodness, and it's inspiring. So what was in the water? What do you think?
Maggie Waters, Chris
Yeah.
Chika, Scott Breaker. Shout out to Jim Deverell. May he rest in
Yeah,
peace.
rest in peace. Yeah, a lot of
Uh,
great people in that eighth grade class. That
Ken
was great school.
Alvarez. Oh
Yeah.
man,
Oh
so
yeah,
many.
Kim Bogda.
Yeah, so many. Oh
Yeah.
man.
So what do you think?
What was in the
Well, I
water?
gotta answer. I gotta answer my mom's question somehow.
Hey man, the Holy Spirit, man. It was holy water.
Because it wasn't the school wasn't that great. It wasn't like it was this, a lyceum of Plato or Aristotle, right? It wasn't the academy,
It's
and
yeah.
it wasn't necessarily I think it fostered our faith, and we had some good priests there and the like, and some good role models, but they
Yeah.
weren't saints. I mean, maybe were saints, but they weren't. You know, it wasn't Saint Gertrude the Great and Hildegard that were teaching us. And so I just wonder what were the conditions by which it produced this outgrowth.
I mean, here it is, man. It's hilarious to me, the irony that your mom is asking this question as if the answer is something other than the one who asked it. It was our
Mm.
parents, man. We grew up with
Hmm.
great parents, parents who loved God, parents who valued discipline, parents who held their kids accountable. The fact that DI was vulnerable to all those criticisms you mentioned just speaks so highly to our parents who raised us well in spite of the weaknesses of the education system. So many people look to outside systems to be the ones to create human beings, but human beings are founded and grounded in family, man. It's the ecclesia domestica that makes human
Mm.
beings. And nobody can ever be a substitute for parents. One of my great friends, my high school teacher in theater, Kim White, we were talking about her. She just retired in the past year. And she said to me, it's not like it was when you guys were in school. And it's not that you guys were better than the kids today. It's that when you guys were bad, we could talk to your parents and we knew that they were more passionate than we as the teachers were about you getting it together. Whereas nowadays you talk to the parents and when you have one conversation, you go, oh, I see where the kids get it from. They get it from you. They're not learning it at home. This is the only place they're learning it. And so I think it's the parents, man. I think it's people like your mom and your dad. God bless them. And I think it was people like my mom and my dad and all those parents, and we came in and out of each other's houses, man. Not even announcing ourselves, running to each other's refrigerators, grabbing things because they created a culture of family. They created that culture of love and they treated us like we mattered, but they held us accountable to doing what was right. I think that's the answer, man.
Right. And the worst thing, well, one of those cultural values that was certainly inculcated in us, I felt it, was that as much as I didn't want to disappoint my mom and dad, the last group of people I wanted to disappoint were my friends and classmates' parents.
Yeah, yeah,
Because they not only would that I believed and trusted, and I had good reason to trust that they were good people
that's
because
right.
my friends were being raised by them,
Yeah,
and I was in their house. I was to be respectful of their culture and that, as you said, ecclesia domestica. What and I wanted to earn their respect. And I don't know how much,
man.
especially if you can't feel free to go into someone else's refrigerator and grab a pop without even asking. I
Right,
don't know how
right.
much that is going on now.
Yeah, seriously, man. One of my favorite stories about your parents is my brother G always tells a story of how I think they had a big game against like St. Catherine, who was a big rival at that time. And G and Billy were getting ready for the game. And, they were like, we got to win this game, right? And so the game is tight. And at one point, late in the game, as they're down, your mom screams out that she's baking cookies if they can pull this off. And my brother Gerald said he looked at Billy, was like, "Hey man, let's win this game,"
My mom does make
and they
those
made a run for it.
those oatmeal chocolate chip cookies are addictive.
It was so good, man. They brought out the best in people.
Now she does put black tar heroin in them. I don't know if that's something. No,
Oh man, that's great.
but yeah. So yeah, they were addictive. Yeah.
If you guys are listening, I love y'all.
Oh, God bless you, TK.
Yeah.
All right, Charlie.
That was kind of beautiful. I could listen to you guys talk about the good old days before I was born for I feel like an hour. TK, I was curious about, I actually don't know much about the origins of Praxis.
Yeah.
I I know it was you and Isaac, but I don't really know how it went. Is that one thing where you and Isaac were friends before, or Isaac hits you up, or how did that work?
Yeah, Isaac's been a good friend of mine for many years preceding Praxis. He was actually the best man at my wedding. And he was always a go-to guy for me when I had ideas, and I've always been a go-to guy for him when he's had ideas. We never had any plan or expectation or dream that we start a business together. But he grew up in an environment where he was homeschooled and essentially unschooled. And alternative education was just education for him. And so he's always talked about that. I've always been passionate about education and particularly self-directed learning. And he came up with this idea one day for an apprenticeship program. And it stemmed from a vision that he had. And it was his expression of an effort to introduce free market innovation to higher education, to take this concept of alternative ed, homeschooling, unschooling, and think about it in terms that weren't just limited to elementary school or secondary ed, but to take it up to the higher level. And when you look at college, it's one of the most subsidized institutions in this country, and it's kind of crazy to think that liberty lovers haven't come up with some sort of alternative, some sort of competitor to this. And that's what he wanted to create. And so he brought the idea to me, just kind of bouncing it off me, and I looked things over, and I was like, yeah, man, this seems like it's really cool. I like it. And so he asked me to help him out in the beginning with the development of the philosophy curriculum and so on. And the more I helped him out, just kind of as a friend, the more I fell in love with the idea and saw the potential. And I says, hey, man, I got to help you build this thing. And so I teamed up with him. I joined him. And the initial iteration of the idea was just basically to send people to apprenticeships. And I was the one who introduced the concept of coaching. And it was funny because coaching is something that he's never sought. It's something that he's never needed. And that just wasn't like his thing. But I saw in the people that were coming into the program that, like, man, they're going to be moving away from their homes, working in adult environments. Many of them homeschoolers, never went to college, and they're going to be going into startups, just a completely different environment. I think it would be valuable for them if they had someone providing some coaching, providing some mentorship and direction along the way to smooth out that transition and help them succeed at work. And so I came on as the first education director for the program. And initially, I did all the coaching. Everyone who went through the program had one-on-one sessions with me. But once we began to grow and that was no longer sustainable, I began to build out a coaching team and develop coaching philosophy. And I spent a lot of my time kind of like a liaison working between the managers that they would go work for and the participants themselves. And so when the managers would have troubles and challenges, they talk things over with me. When the participants would have troubles and challenges, they talk things over with me. And it was my job to make sure that everyone got the coaching experience that they needed to succeed in the workspace. And so I worked with Praxis, watching that team go from just Isaac and I to being big enough to hand things off to two of our alumni, Cameron Sorsby and Mitchell Earl, and they've taken things, to the next level. So that's in a nutshell the origin stories of it.
Charlie, why don't you, for people that don't know, you should inform people about how you got affiliated with Praxis, how amazing that connection was.
Yeah, that's a good point. So Praxis, I've actually found out about it through TK at the Freedom Fest that we went to in South Dakota.
Oh, we'll get to Freedom Fest.
But that's where it started. That's where my Praxis journey started.
Uh-huh.
And I think it was TK that said that I should check out this speech that Cameron was, or this presentation that Cameron was giving. I remember going up to Cameron at the time thinking, man, I wish I had heard about this before I just got this new job. And he said, keep us in mind. You never know if you might need us down the line. Turns out I did need him down the line, and led to a sales job from there and then starting my own company. So Praxis was awesome, and the fruits that you produced were definitely bountiful, I guess, in my life. So I appreciate that for to you and Isaac, something that something that we talk about being thankful. Every day I'm thinking about Praxis and like, how did I get here to running my own business from where I was at, just not knowing what to do not too long ago, too, 3 or 4 years ago. So I appreciate that. And I don't know if I've ever had the chance to tell you that, but that one weird trip to Rapid City, South Dakota, that was before Richard, that was before the book was even published, right?
Right. Oh yeah. It was just, I think it wasn't even halfway done by that point.
Yeah. I think we had another summer left.
Yes.
Hmm.
Right. So
Well, Charlie, I appreciate that story, man. It's cool to hear things like that, and it's cool to hear from Praxis alum and see what they're up to in the world. There are a few that reach out that I keep in touch with, and that's always a pleasure. I tell you, it's funny because the world today, the post-COVID world, is one where you say the kinds of things like what Isaac and I were saying 10 years ago. They're boringly uncontroversial. To talk about alternative ed today, even at the higher level, boringly uncontroversial. But we took a lot of heat early on, and we were pioneers of the inevitable in that regard, having these conversations. And man, a lot of people took it personally. A lot of people were angry with us, and even saying things like, not everybody needs a college degree, and that you can succeed in the world without a college degree. This has now been empirically proven beyond refutation at this point, where there are lots of people who have gone out there and done it. And that still leaves people with the right to go to college if that's what they decide is what's best for them. But nowadays, because of COVID, I think people began to increase in their confidence that they can make it without a lot of these schools. When a lot of schools took away some of the social experiences that they felt they needed, but still charged them the same amount of money for it, people started to see the cracks in the system a little bit. I think with a lot of things that happened politically, people started to suspect the level of indoctrination that had already been obvious to many others. And I think now so many of those things are clear that there is a healthy skepticism towards academia and towards conventional schooling, compulsory schooling, subsidized schooling that we just didn't see 10 years ago. And it's kind of cool to see that progress and to know, without flattering ourselves, that we play some role in initiating a lot of those conversations that led to that.
speaking of pushing the envelope, do you suspect that you guys drew a lot of general ire? Because not only were you saying that, as you articulated, that college isn't necessarily best or the right path for everybody, there was more than an element from what I could ascertain that you were saying that college and that degree could be an obstacle or a hindrance to where you ought to be. So whereas you had books coming out at the same time, like Brian Kaplan's the what was it
The
the
case against
case
education.
against education, right?
Yeah.
The case against education, which we have the theoretical and the argument there, which was anti-collegiate education.
Yeah,
You guys were the praxis and practical end of that.
that's right. Yeah.
In other words, did the your unabashed, I won't say unabashed antagonism, but more so a healthy aggression toward, or more so aggression against, just it wasn't aggression against the idea of college per se, but aggression against the status quo. Just I'm gonna, because it's demanded of me, and what this is the traditional path toward success, I'm going to simply give in and acquiesce and I'll go to college. That idea, that notion.
That's exactly right. It was an aggressive critique of the mindless, guilt tripping
Mhm.
indoctrination, brainwashing of everyone who graduates high school into thinking that college is the next logical step and that it's a no brainer that that's what you ought to do. It reminds me of a phenomenon, and I've used this analogy before, like with Bitcoin. when you talk about something like Bitcoin, people have all sorts of skeptical questions about it, right? They have all sorts of questions about, like, how do you know it's real money? What is it based on? What is it anchored in? And so on. And I actually love those skeptical questions. I think it's amazing. I want people to ask those sorts of things more about anything that I sell, anything that I preach, anything that I believe. But there's something about things that are new, things that are an alternative to the norm, that invokes that skepticism. And we tend to throw it completely out of the window when it comes to things that have been the way they've been for a while. And my problem isn't that people ask skeptical questions about Bitcoin. My problem is they don't ask it about the Federal Reserve at all. They don't ask it about the US dollar at all. They don't ask it about fiat government backed currency at all. And in a similar way, when it comes to college, it's like if someone says, I want to go to Kansas State, I want to go to Appalachian State, I want to go to University of Michigan, people immediately say, congratulations, that's awesome, right? They don't have to know what you're majoring in. They don't have to know your 5-year plan for how you're going to use that degree or how you're going to make the most of your time. The fact that you're going to college is already enough for them to celebrate you like you're a success. But then if some students like, I'm not going to go to college. I think I'm going to work for a couple of years. I think I'm going to do a gap year. I think I'm going to save my money, stay out of debt. You absolutely have to have a 10-year plan for every possible hypothetical scenario where someone doesn't hire you and how you're going to make it. And I don't mind that. I like it when we hold each other to the fire and say, give me an argument for why your decision is rational. What I don't like is when we do that selectively and when we approach life as if only some things should be scrutinized versus all things. And so my philosophy has always been skepticism isn't just something we apply to conversations about ghosts and aliens and religion. Methodological skepticism ought to be a way of life, and we should do that with everything. And so a lot of the conversations we had around college, I think it annoyed people because we pressed against that religious devotion to this is the way, and that selective skepticism applied towards people who didn't go that way. And in fairness, we definitely took our fair share of shots as well. We definitely took our fair share of rhetorical shots as well.
That's good.
I got one more praxis question, and then we can move on.
Yeah.
Just from a business standpoint, if you had one mulligan, one do-over, or a move that you wish you could have made looking back 10 years later now, what would that have been?
If I could do one thing over, praxis, oh man, I'm going to answer that unfairly because, and then I'll play the game and give you an answer. But my real TK answer is I really cherish the mistakes and I cherish the decisions that were made with the best knowledge that we had at the time. And I make a distinction between a good decision and success. Sometimes a good decision doesn't always lead to success, but it's a smart move based on the evidence that you have. So I don't know if I would change a whole lot and do a whole lot over. That's kind of my initial reaction, but let me just play the freaking game because I had a Bible study the other week. And one of the questions was like, hey, if you could go back in time and attend a Bible study led by Jesus, what topic would you pick? And people were like, well, we already have Bible study led by Jesus when we go to church. And I was like, okay, all right, that's fine, but play the game, all right? Play the game. And then when you play the game, it gets fun. So let me just play the game. One is I would have left earlier. And the reason I say that is because I think because I was so loyal to the idea and I was there from the beginning and I was attached to the participants in a way where they felt like my nieces, my nephews, and my children, I think I stayed too long, like by about 2 to 3 years, because I felt like this might not make it without me. It might self-destruct without me. And I think had I left earlier, I could have opened up the opportunity for someone with more energy to be able to come in and do some things differently than me. And I think I could have been useful to Praxis in ways that would have been akin to the kind of work that I'm doing now. I think I would have been a better force for it in that way. So I think in some ways I was too close. And one of the things I've learned as an entrepreneur is it's not just enough to move quickly and break things when you're starting things up, but to really think critically about an exit plan and to get the hell out of there before you're in a position where you're stagnating your own growth or stagnating the growth of the thing that you started. You got to know when you've done the work that you've been called to do and when to hand it over to somebody else. So I think that's one thing that I might have done differently. But I have to think about that, man. That's a really tough but good question. But let me pause there.
Well, while you're thinking about that, on the subject of religiosity
Yeah,
and
yeah.
politics as religion.
That's the true religion of
Yeah.
America.
Well, you on the Minimalists
Yeah,
with Josh, you guys had a recent episode where you had a lot of contributors and callers and Patreon supporters
yeah,
talk about their struggles with the political landscape, their emotions revolving around the election. And we got into a little bit of an exchange, you and I, about, well, let's expand upon that.
yeah,
And I want to give you a forum to do that away from the the theater and the drama, the setting of the minimalists,
yeah,
because in listening to your very cogent and articulate explanations of how we ought to avoid placing such, well, I won't call it energy so much, but so much of our essence or identity in the political sphere. I mean, at the same time, the question that really was, and I don't know if you got onto this on the maximalist, because I was too cheap to sign up for the Patreon to do that. But but at what point are we getting to, if a sincerely held, you made this, let me explain to those who didn't listen to that, and I encourage everybody to listen to that episode of the Minimalist and all the Minimalist episodes. Hell, go sign up for the Patreon too. But you made this brilliant distinction about belief and distinguishing between belief and how one arrives at belief, or more so,
belief and theory of belief
in the
for me.
theory of belief, and in a sense, assuming the track by which someone arrives at their contentions, their deeply held beliefs. And where we get in trouble isn't necessarily the beliefs that one holds, even if they be deeply held and dear to them, but more so when we contend that, well, this wrongly held belief you came about because of nefarious or malevolent or even to an extent ignorant by ignorant means. And then therefore we're able to cast aspersions because of that. So I
Mhm.
want you to expand upon that and how toxic that is. And then I got a challenging follow-up because I know this is going to spur on another question.
Yeah. So the distinction is between belief and theory of belief formation. A belief is something that you regard to be true. A belief is what you defend when you are having an argument. It's a conclusion that you use premises to support. Theory of belief formation is an explanation that you give to account for why someone has the particular beliefs that they have. So I'll give an example of this in the realm of something that is not controversial, but it really does apply to everything. So what I talk about on the show is like, let's say I believe the Boston Red Sox best team in baseball, right? And maybe my argument for that is things like the number of Hall of Famers they have, the number of World Series appearances, and so forth. So I may have evidence for that belief. And the theory of belief formation, however, is what do I think of other people who happen to believe differently, right? And so I'm at the bar talking with my buddy, and he says, TK, I disagree with you about the Red Sox, man. I think the New York Yankees are the best team of all time. That mere difference of belief is not enough to generate conflict. We have opposing beliefs, but you need something else to generate conflict. What you need is an uncharitable theory of belief formation to get conflict. And here's what that could look like. Deep down inside, everyone knows that the Boston Red Sox are the best team of all time. Everyone knows this. And anyone who tells you that they're not is lying to themselves. And they're just trying to cover up the fact that they hate Boston and that they hate people who are from Boston. And they're full of crap. Now, if that's my theory of belief formation regarding all the people who think the California Angels or the New York Yankees or the Chicago Cubs are better than the Red Sox, it is nearly impossible for me to have a constructive, charitable conversation with someone who doesn't share my belief. Now, when we get into things like politics or differences in religion, this principle still applies. It's not just a matter of personal preferences and taste, but even when we make objective claims about the world. And you see it in politics today. Why are people mad? It's not just because who you voted for. It's because of what they think it means for you to have voted for that person. If someone says, hey, you voted differently than me, but the reason I think you did that is because after studying things very carefully, you came to a conclusion that's opposite of the one that I have. But I think you're wrong. And I think if I could talk with you long enough, I could persuade you to back down from some of the beliefs you have. That theory of belief formation leads to really productive conversations. However, if I have a theory of belief formation that says you voted that way because you don't care about anybody but yourself, you voted that way because you hate other people, you voted that way because the only thing you care about is rich people, you voted that way because you just want to appear virtuous without doing the hard work of actually becoming virtuous. Well, now the way that I react to you believing what you believe is based on the way I see you as a person because of the process I'm assuming you employed in arriving at that belief. And so I think in terms of political marketing, the way people are motivated is by the propagating of theories of belief formation that what makes folks feel bad about not voting a certain way, right? And so I'll give you an example. You know, when you have Barack Obama talking to a group of black guys, I want to say to the brothers, if you, I'm saying some of y'all, like you got a problem with a woman in office, right? And then you see Magic Johnson saying, you know, come on, guys, my young black man, right? Come on, guys. And you see that, right? And that's great political marketing to them because what they're doing is they're motivating you, you know, appealing to their sense of morality. Hey, if you don't vote this way, you're a bad person. You don't want to be a bad person, do you? Right? And so then when you turn out to maybe not vote that way, well, then other people say, well, this guy clearly doesn't like women. Well, this guy clearly doesn't believe that black women can lead. And we do it on all sides of the political spectrum. And it's not a Republican thing. It's not a Democratic thing. To me, it's a statist thing. And I think it's part of what's killing conversation today. And I think it's not just unproductive, but I think it's lazy. You know, when I grew up, we were afraid of being shamed by people who knew their stuff and who could decimate your weak arguments with logic. Today, I have no fear of that because no one's going to debate you because people don't debate today. They don't argue. They don't even burden themselves with the desire or the need to back up what they say with evidence. People are completely unburdened by what has been argued, completely unburdened by that. And so they just go straight to shame. Shame on you for believing that conclusion. Shame on you for thinking that way. And that's very powerful for them because it makes people get themselves in line because of a fear of being canceled, fear of not having a job. It makes people straighten up. It makes people be silent about what they really believe. And so you see less and less like substantial debate and argument happening today. What you see are a bunch of people shaming each other by making their little solo videos. Today, I'm going to talk about this person that I would never, ever get in the room with and actually have a real conversation with, because then I'd be held accountable to reason and logic. And I want nothing to do with that. I want to do something that's more entertaining, clickbaiting, that's going to get views. And today I'm going to talk about this person. Here's what they said. Shame on them. And here's this other thing they said. Shame on them. And so we're haunted by these theory of belief formation that if you're wrong, It's because you're a grifter. It's because you're a liar. It's because you're a bigot. It's because you're a racist. And these kinds of conversations make it impossible to learn, make it impossible to interact and deal with people. And it's just lazy. It's very lazy.
And shame on Obama for upbraiding young black men when he couldn't even marry a black woman at all. He could forget about voting. He married a black man. What? What? Did I say something wrong? So,
Sleep, I think this
no.
is what we're talking about. Uh, now you're
Wait a
saying,
second. Wait, all right. I'll bring it back on the
uh,
tracks here. So
I mean,
wait.
I just made a cogent point about shame, and now you're shaming me because you got a problem with Michelle, and I think that's unfair.
All right, you're making a
Hey,
joke. Well,
hey,
you're
but
right.
look,
Listen, to your point, okay, back to the serious side. How many, when I was listening to the episode, all I kept thinking was just to substantiate that core argument about the process by which one arrives at, let's just again stick with political opinion. How few, in fact, how seldom, and in fact, it never is uttered the question to someone if someone confronts you with a political position that you find odious, no one ever says, "Okay, how did you get there?" How, I adamantly disagree. You could go off and say, "I adamantly disagree with you," but I want to understand how did you get there?
so
Uh,
let me say this about. Can I say something about that?
yeah, yeah.
I think the lack of that is due to a failure of imagination. We fail to imagine how easy it is for someone to deem reasonable a way of looking at the world that is not ours. It's so difficult to imagine. And one of the reasons why it's difficult to imagine is because many of us have been deceived, conditioned, socially engineered into thinking of virtue as the inability to understand evil. So, a very common phrase you'll hear people say, which is almost always taken to be a virtuous phrase, is I will never understand people who do things like that. Oh, I will never understand people who are that ignorant. And we actually speak of that as if it's a virtue. It's not a virtue, it's actually a weakness. Our ability to protect ourselves from evil, our ability to resist temptation, our ability to teach other people how to protect themselves, our ability to make the things that we don't want to happen in this world a little bit more predictable comes from us being able to recognize patterns and in beliefs and in behaviors so that we can render them understandable. It is a good thing to understand. I would never be a serial killer, but I can understand that. I can understand why one person would steal something that doesn't belong to them. I can understand why someone would do something illegal. I can understand why someone would lie. I can understand why someone would cheat. And I'm a better person for being able to understand that. But we say, well, I will never understand that, not knowing that we're putting out a weakness, a deficiency in our ability to engage in productive sense making. We're putting that out there as if it's a virtue because we haven't learned how to say, my capacity to understand the thing is not the same thing as my vulnerability to doing it. My
Or
ability to,
participation in it.
yeah, an explanation is not a justification. Everybody that does good in the world has to take something that is problematic and understand it. How can we ever solve problems if all the detectives were like, I will never understand, how someone
Mhm.
could commit murder. I will never
Mm.
understand that. Well, you're never going to solve a crime with that attitude, You should try to understand. The virtue is to say, I do understand. And there's a distinction between innocence and integrity. Innocence is the lack of awareness of evil. It is when I have no concept of what it even is to lie, to cheat, to steal, to murder. Whereas integrity is when you do have a concept of these things and you are presented with attractive opportunities to do one or more of these things, and you choose not to anyway because it's simply not right. Innocence is for babies and puppies. Integrity is for adults. And so when you say, I will never understand that, you're being a baby and a puppy and you're holding that up as if it's a virtue. The adult thing to do is say, I don't understand that. And that's okay as a starting point, but that's not sufficient to remain there. I must understand that because that's part of what it means to be intelligent. That's part of what it means to be wise. And that's part of what I need to do in order to protect the weak, in order to advocate for the vulnerable, and in order to protect myself from being deceived by these same forces that bring other people to these lowly states.
So what happens? By the way, I don't like when you say innocence. You know why?
Why?
Because I get your point about innocence equating to this almost innate desire for ignorance. I don't want to go there type thing.
Mm-hmm.
But innocence from the Latin, because I always use innocence in understanding, for example, intrinsic evil.
Yeah.
So innocence from the Latin means non-threatening. So when we talk
Yeah.
about murder, we differentiate. It's direct killing of the
Yeah.
innocent. They are non-threatening, not in sense
Yeah.
of lacking guilt or that
Yeah.
they're pure of
Yeah.
heart. Now, what happens when we get to the point in which we understand to the best of our cognitive and even emotive abilities that someone after we ask that question, how'd you get there? And they say how they got to arriving at, let's say, transgenderism. There might be a logic there. There might be a personal experience that lands them in the conclusion or with the worldview that they possess. But even in the process, you see that this is not directed toward the good. They have erred in their moral science. And then you go through, let's go through the third step. You even try to point out the perhaps errors in the ethical notions that they deployed to justify this or that decision, or that this experience of theirs justifies the position. Where do we get the discernment? And I think that's what's lacking here is discernment when we talk, especially in the political realm. When you just say, I have to therefore condemn at this point and disassociate myself from this person. And this is a particularly uh, apropos because we're talking about these instances where, especially after an election, I know it's cliched, but you're going to the relative's house for Thanksgiving. And I'm hearing again more and more than ever before that people are locking out their relatives. I'm not associating with them because they voted for Trump.
Mm.
So talk about that.
So we got two things in there. Like, what do we do in a scenario where we have expressed the curiosity to discover the real process of reasoning and it's still terrible? What do we do there?
Yes.
And then what do I think about the people that are cutting off family members and so on because they voted for Trump? So, all right, I'll come back to that one. But the first part, well, we should begin with the observation that there are people in this world that are hell bent on evil, right? There are people that do intend you harm. And you are naive if you move about in this world thinking that there is no one who is willing to exploit you, take advantage of you, or do you grave harm. There are people that are like that. And when you encounter people like that, you should behave rationally in a way that is conducive to you protecting yourself from such people. The problem, however, is when you arrive at your conclusion regarding who is such a person through assumptions rather than evidence.
Mm-hmm.
So if someone is trying to break in your house, you've got good evidence that they intend you harm. You don't even need to know what motivated them to do it. Protect yourself.
No,
right?
you got to ask them the process. Why they, what brought them here? Was it an Uber?
But my problem is when we just assume without thinking at a deeper level. And this isn't just coming from a place of being nice. It's coming from a place of actually caring about this ancient art form that's important to all personal growth and human flourishing, and it's called learning. Mm. And whenever you fail to get a result that you want in life, you are screwed if you can look at that and say, I have nothing that I can learn from this. There's literally nothing that I can improve. There's literally nothing that I can do differently. There's literally nothing I can gain by asking questions about why people respond that way. Like, think about if you approach this entrepreneurially, you started a business and you sincerely believed that your product was the best, right? And you had all kinds of reasons for believing that. You have a burger restaurant, and then someone comes in and they're like, yeah, I don't like the burger. Another person comes in, I don't like the burger. Half the people that come in the place don't like the burger. I suppose you can say, well, you guys just don't know good food. I suppose you can say that, you know, but you're not going to learn. You're not going to grow. Maybe people are being irrational in some kind of way, but it would still behoove you to learn something. Maybe your burgers are good, but the server is being a jerk to them. And that's information that you can't find out until you talk to them. Maybe the service is good and the burger is good, but there's something that smells funky in the kitchen, man, and it's just bothering people, and they're getting out of it. Something's going on. Maybe there's a false rumor about your restaurant you don't know about, and people are talking about it, and it's keeping them out of there. You simply cannot grow unless you're willing to look at the results you have in your life and say, I don't like these results. What can I do differently? There is nobody that is ever successful at anything that can just look at undesirable results and go, well, I did everything perfectly. And if you replace me with literally anybody, and if you replace the techniques I employed with literally anything else, you're only going to get the same or worse results than what I got. I mean, you can think that way if you want to, but you're not learning. That's an anti-learning disposition, right? Oh, man.
Oh, man. For those listening on audio, TK just went dark. He's in dark TK mode. like Dark Mega.
I'm sorry.
But not like Dark Mega.
These automatic lights, you don't move around in this room enough.
That's great.
That's great. So that's what I would say about the first part, it's less about, oh, I just want to be nice towards others and I don't ever want to be mean. You want to protect the disposition that makes personal growth possible for you.
Right.
But let's talk about the folks who are, canceling holiday plans, people that voted for Trump and so on. So first, each of us reserves the right, freedom of association, right? So no matter what I think, I'll fight for everyone's freedom of association. You get to hang out with whoever you want. And if you don't want to hang out with someone because of their religious beliefs, their political beliefs, or because of who their favorite basketball team is, hey, that's your right. And I respect that right. You get to make that call. In addition to that, there are always particulars when it comes to these situations, such that, there may be more to it than just a person having a different belief than you. There may be something about the way they argue that just rubs you the wrong way, the way they fail to respect you when you're having a disagreement. Just because someone is on the side of truth doesn't mean they know how to interact with people. I do say that sometimes if you want to know why people have such a hard time being wrong, you can just look at the way people react when they're right. Sometimes people, when they're right, they can just be absolute jerks and make it really hard for people to admit that they're wrong. So there are a lot of nuanced reasons for why people may not want to talk with somebody that they like, that they don't like, or that voted a different way. But here's what concerns me about this. Many of the people that are taking this stance, I'm not talking to anybody that voted this way, because I don't want to have anything to do for you. And let me be clear. I don't say this out of fear, but I just want to make it clear. I am a raging anti-statist. So I didn't vote for Trump. I didn't vote for Kamala. I'm a raging anti-statist. Okay. And no, I don't change during the mass hypnosis that takes place every 4 years. Okay. So the concern I have about this is many of the people that I hear this from are the same voices who decry privilege as a problem in our world. And I can't think of anything more privileged than taking a stance that says, I am not going to associate with or interact with people that disagree with me about my political position because I believe that's immoral. Let's just say that they're right. This is such a rare form of privilege that most people simply cannot afford to do. People who live in apartments, I told this story at our recent Sunday symposium when Shelly and I first got married. We moved into this new apartment, right? And we're in our apartment and we're watching a movie together, and we hear sounds from the apartment next door where the guy is blasting movie from a category, which in order to describe the rating, I got to take one of the last three letters of the alphabet and repeat it 3 times. He's blasting one of those movies, right? And it was so awkward and uncomfortable because it's like really loud and we can't just watch our movie. And so I have to pause it and I go next door. It turns down. He answers the door. I say, hey, bro, it's none
Did
of
he
my
have clothes on?
huh?
Did he have clothes on, or was he into it?
Yeah, clothes on. He took the time, I said. I say, hey, brother, it's none of my business what you do in your private time in your own space, but I'm just letting you know, me and my lady next door, man, and I hear everything. I hear everything. If you can just turn it down a little bit, I'd appreciate it. And he goes, what I watch is my own business, and slams the door in my face. Let me hit the pause button. Let me tell you another one. I'm at the school on the east side of Detroit. And the lady introduces me to the students. And I come up there and I get ready to talk. And there's some dude sitting at the front of the class. He don't even know me. He gets up like, and he gets up and he walks to the middle of the classroom and he does like this and he lays on the floor physically and goes, and the other kids laughing and everybody looking at me to see what I'm gonna do. Okay. Pause. Let me tell you another one. Then I'll make my point. I'm working at a restaurant. There's a guy that comes in. He orders a burger and a beer. The restaurant that I work at this time, their policy is that whenever you bring out a beer, you bring the bottle, but you also bring a frosted glass. So the bartender always puts a frosted glass next to the bottle when you order a beer. I do this the first time. He doesn't touch his frosted glass because I, go to pour it. He's like, no, I got it. And he drinks it out of the bottle. Okay. When he orders a second beer, I see that the bottle's empty. The frosted glass is remaining on the table. And so I make an inference that this guy doesn't like the frosted glass. So this time I'm just going to bring him a bottle of beer. So I bring it in, I go to the bar and I bring my man a bottle of beer, no frosted glass. I sit it down. He says, what is your problem? Huh? He says, when you bring the beer, you bring a frosted glass. Now, I wanted to take that bottle of beer and just like pour it on him like that. Now, I could go on and on and on and on and give you more and more stories like this. But what these 3 stories have in common, and most people can relate to these types of stories, what these 3 stories have in common is that I was not able to solve my problem with any of these people by unsubscribing to them on YouTube, by unfollowing them on Instagram, by deleting my Twitter account, and by getting on my private jet and flying to a little island where I don't have to deal with them anymore. Because the reality of my life then and the reality of my life now is that every single day I got to drive on the highway with people that I think are idiots. I got to shop at the grocery store with people that I think are idiots. I got to interact with people at coffee shops that I think are idiots. I have to work for people who sometimes act like idiots. I have to work with people who sometimes act like idiots. I don't live on an island, so I live in a neighborhood where I live with other idiots or people who seem like idiots to me. I live in an apartment where sometimes people behave like idiots and do things that are idiotic to me. And I can't solve any of these problems by being like, well, I'm just not going to deal with you anymore. Because the way you show up to your life, when you have to get along with people, when you have to harmoniously coexist with people that aren't just different at a level of like, who's your favorite baseball team, but that are different on very important issues, that's just reality. And that's the reality for most people. And so if your philosophy of life is like, hey, I'm not going to talk to you anymore because you voted for Trump, it's like, okay, maybe you can get away with that. And if you can get away with that, cool, because I envy the kind of life that you have and that freedom and power and wealth or whatever it is you got going for yourself where you can afford to actually get away with that. But first of all, nobody under 18 can do that. I'm sure when you grew up, you and you and your siblings didn't always get along. You know what I mean? Me and my siblings didn't always get along, but we didn't have the ability to delete each other or unsubscribe from each other. It's like, well, here we are in the same house with each other. I absolutely hate you. And somehow I'm going to figure out how to make some mental adjustments to coexist with someone that I think is stupid. I'm going to have to figure that out. Man, there is so much character and wisdom that comes from just having to figure that stuff out. And so even if you can live that way, like nobody under 18, people that go to school, people that have siblings, they don't have that option. So what are they supposed to do? Well, I guess we're modeling for you, young children, an approach to problem solving that says the way you deal with these kinds of people over here that we don't like is something that you're powerless to act on until you turn 18. And when you turn 18, I sure hope that you have the resources and the power and the privilege to be able to just cut anybody off that you don't like them. Sorry, I can't just do that. I can't just cut off my landlord. I can't just cut off my neighbors. I can't just cut off the mean, idiotic customers. I got to live with them. I can't cut off everybody in the Catholic Church who embarrasses me. I got to live with them, and I got to figure it out. And you tend to communicate better, and you tend to problem solve better when you don't have the option of just cutting people off. So if you can cut people off, sure. There are instances where that's what you got to do in order to be safe. But I find that attitude very concerning. And more importantly than being concerning, my honest opinion about it is that I don't think it's sustainable. I think the people that are saying that, they feel a lot of strong emotions. I think they're going to try it. And maybe people like Ellen DeGeneres, who has a level of wealth that most Americans don't have, maybe people like her will get away with it. But I even suspect a lot of them who talk that kind of talk, they're going to realize that it's not sustainable. And they're going to have to come back and realize, okay, y'all, I hate you guys, but we got to figure out how to do life together.
Yeah. When Ellen DeGeneres announced she was moving to the UK, my first thought was along those lines. The person that's going to greet her at the airport to welcome her to her little country hamlet is James Delingpole. Did you get the facts? That would be, wouldn't that be just choice, Charlie? If Delingpole showed up and Portia de Rossi he carried Portia de Rossi's bag to her new country estate? No,
I don't think that would go over too well,
I don't
actually.
think that would go too well. Yeah.
I mean, what do you guys think about that? I mean, to me, like that doesn't strike you as. And look, I'm not here to harp on privilege. I think that word has had so much baggage imported into it. But
Yeah.
anybody that's concerned about privilege would have to acknowledge the ability to get away with that is one of the highest forms of privilege imaginable.
Yeah, it's a privilege. It's the more so the obstinacy of I I'm going to be more passionate about not examining why these people come to the conclusion that they do. And my obstinacy is going to result in just shutting the door. And uh that is a level of juvenile stubbornness and sort of throwing a fit. That's what it is. It's throwing a fit when you don't get your particular way. And I guess the thing that really hits home is that it's all about impositional control. I mean, why are you so upset because this person voted for one person to exercise coercive power over everybody as opposed to the other? It's like to me that's what. But to your point when you were talking about the minimalists, you really want to get people firing on you from all sides. Start talking about how you didn't vote because you read Lysander Spooner, and although he didn't say voting was wrong, you could conclude that you have no power, especially with an Australian ballot. I don't even have to announce that I'm choosing one person over another to impose power and authority over you, right? So the whole system is so lacking in integrity and is so divorced and outside of natural law and how we form organic relationships, either familial, which is the most precious, but then, of course, well, it's not the most precious, it's our relationship with God, but secondarily, and then in the marketplace, which is much more organic and voluntaristic. So that's when you, like you said on the episode, man, you you could say, "Oh, I'm voting for Trump, or I'm voting for Kamala, I'm voting for Newsom or Pritzker or whatever it might be." But man, you say you're not voting at all, look out.
Hey, look, this is how bad it is. This is how bad it
Hmm.
is. You could talk to someone as a Democrat and voting for Kamala, and they could be like, you really need to vote. You really need to vote. And you can say, all right, okay, what if I vote for Trump? You still want me to vote?
Mm.
And now they're confronted with a dilemma because they really don't want you to vote for Trump, but like their religion demands that you vote,
Yeah,
right?
right.
And they're gonna be like, well, I don't think you should vote for him, but you do need to vote, but you need to make now look.
You better go to Easter Mass, even though you didn't go at all the
Right. I'm
entire
like,
rest
hey,
of the
look,
year.
if I
You
were
better
you,
go to
I would just
Christmas.
if I were you, I'd tell me not to vote, right?
Yeah,
But like, but this is the only religion where even the non-believers tell you that you're going to
yeah.
hell. You know.
It's so true. I remember a friend of mine, he was a we were at this is years ago, and it's Lent, TK, and it was a Friday during Lent. And we're sitting down, or we're standing on a bunch of people around, and he takes food. It was at an event, and he takes food. He starts eating meat, and he goes, "Oh shit, I forgot it's Friday during Lent." And I go, "Eat the meat, eat away. You're not a Catholic. You're not. You why? This is what you didn't even get ashes on Ash Wednesday when everyone goes for some reason, you know, because they're handing free shit out, even if it's burned palms. Everybody goes." So you didn't even go to that. So what are you worried about? He looked at me, he goes, "You're right, and ate." So I mean, what are we doing here? What's the facade? This is kabuki theater of religiosity. Charlie, ask him a question before I get to the last thing, before we can get through the
Let
last.
me say really quickly about political atheism. You know,
Hmm.
that's the term of choice I use for my position that I'm a political atheist. That I am to government what an atheist is to the concept of God, um, or compulsory government or the state, not necessarily governing force or governing body. But one thing that's interesting to me, I'm open to being convinced. You know, if someone sat down and says, "Hey, man, I want to make the argument for why you should believe everything you were taught in civics class or something like that." Like, okay, I'm open to hear the argument, right?
Good luck, but I'll listen.
Right, good luck, but I'll listen. What's interesting to me, and this goes back to skepticism as methodology rather than skepticism as social signal that I selectively apply to aliens, ghosts, and the paranormal.
Yeah.
When you bring up something like religion to a non-religious person, and they were to say, "Why should I believe in God?" And you're like, "Well, didn't you pay attention in Sunday school?" What are they going to say? Well, yeah, but why should I believe anything that I said in Sunday school? That they said in Sunday school? Well, every teacher says it. He just exists. Well, why should I believe that? Well, the Bible teaches it. Well, why should I believe that?
Authority.
Yeah, I think as a believer in the Bible, these are questions that demand an answer. These are fair questions. But what's fascinating is when you talk about the non-voting position, people assume there's no possible explanation for that other than that you were just too lazy to go to the voting booth or that you're just too passive, and they blame you for the outcome of the election, which entirely misses the point, right? Because you can't be guilt tripped for the outcome of the election if you believe that that outcome is selected for them, right?
Yeah.
And so there's this sense in which it's like, hey, why do you believe that? Why do you believe that? You were told this thing, right? You were told this story. You were introduced to this concept in your civics class. Why do you believe that's true? It's not my job to justify myself. Like, why do you believe that that's true? Why do you believe the story they told you about what happens when you fill out this piece of paper and you put on your button and you put that sheet of paper in that machine? You believe a narrative about what's going to happen to that piece of paper, who's going to come get it, and who's going to go count it, and what that all means. Why do you think that's true? Besides, that's what somebody told you, and you can't imagine why they would lie about that. Why do you believe that's true?
Mm.
I think that's a fair question. It demands an answer. I'm here anytime, by the way. For anybody who ever hears this at any point and thinks they have a compelling answer, I'm here anytime. I'm not from this generation. I believe in arguments and debates. I won't shame you for being wrong. Shame on you. I just want to hear your arguments.
That's it.
Richard, you go with the last topic, and then
Mm.
we gotta get to the people segment.
All right. You were at Fee for almost 10 years, the foundation for economic education.
Foundation for
And
economic
as anybody listening, even in the most passive way to this podcast, would already conclude, again, using intellect and reason, that this man is an apostle of freedom, of the best virtues that humans can aspire to. Not only does he preach it, but he lives it. Well, all right, yeah, he's right. He's okay. Uh, what happened? I mean, why all of a sudden you're gone from Fee?
All right. How much time you got?
All right, 4 minutes because there's a suburb we got to get to.
You got more than 4 minutes.
Okay,
All right.
5 minutes.
All right. So let me contextualize my departure from Fee by telling you why I partnered with Fee in the first place.
Yeah.
I first came into contact with Fee years ago, like about a decade, when Isaac and I co-founded Praxis. And at that time, as I mentioned earlier, conversations around alternative education were so controversial. The place where our message was really greeted was in the so-called Liberty bubble. Students for Liberty conferences, Young Americans for Liberty conferences, all these different types of places. I remember one year, man, I did like every regional for Students for Liberty. And so we would do a lot of speaking there about free market education, but we also did a lot of talks about entrepreneurship as a theory of social change and how the way to create a freer society, it's not just limited to going into politics. I would often joke about wanting to start a place called the Reverse Reagan Salvation, where I convince people to leave a life of political theater and actually do the real thing and make real art, because we need artists, we need people that live creative lives, we need entrepreneurs, we need builders, because that is the most underestimated way to move the needle for freedom. Always believe that. I never took the red pill because I never drank the Kool-Aid. I don't have a conversion story to the freedom philosophy. I always believe this. Never trusted in politicians, never looked to them as our source for freedom. And so we gave a lot of talks on that. And one day there was a programs coordinator from Fee who heard one of the talks I gave. He says, man, I'd love for you to come to one of these workshops and give a talk. And I did. And I had a good time. And they invited me back. And I became a demanded, teacher for some of these workshops. And I did that for probably a few years, maybe at the rate of anywhere from like 5 to 8 times a year, depending on when they needed me and when I was available, right? And it was mutually beneficial. We got a chance to get our message out there. And at the same time, I got a chance to do something that I enjoy, which is talk about the philosophy of freedom. When I would go to these workshops, though, and I would interact with the students there, I would see people like Brian Brinberg coming in and just dropping so many gems. I would see people like Aunt Davies coming in, dropping so many gems. And I look around and I would think, man, some of the people that really need to be here are not here. And I'm thinking, Black folks. And so, I tell Black people, I tell different people like, hey, you should check out one of these workshops. You should check out one of these seminars. And, nobody really picks up on it, right? And sometimes you see Black folks at some of these workshops and they just like not enjoying it, not fitting in. And this bothers me, man, because I'm like, this stuff is so valuable. And I see the entrepreneurial spirit as being so alive and well in Black communities, man. You go into these churches, you go into these schools, you go to these streets. These young brothers have so much swag, so much style, so much confidence, so much capacity for risk taking. And you see a lot of it just being misdirected because of a lack of mentorship or a lack of perceived opportunity. And behind that intimidating aura of bravado is a lot of insecurity and low self-esteem and all these different things going on. And I wanted them in there. And so one day I approached Larry Reed and I say, hey, Larry, here's something that I would like to do. I would love to get more Black folks to come to these workshops, and I know how to do it. And at that time, and I think at this time as well, there wasn't much success in so-called liberty circles at being able to track Black folks. Some of that has to do with the fact that people just generally assume that because Black folks so persistently vote Democrat, that they're just going to always be socialists and never be interested in this kind of stuff. But some of that just comes from, you know, whenever you see Black people presented out there as the spokespersons, they sometimes don't really talk to Black people. They talk about Black people to white people who wish they had the courage to say those types of things to Black people, right?
Right.
And a lot of it sometimes is condescending, telling Black folks, pull up your pants, stop blaming white people for your problems, talk straight English, da 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 da. And for me, I wasn't interested in any of that. Not that none of those people did anything that was good. I just wasn't interested in any of that. When I walk into these schools, I think, man, there's so many cool people here. Like, I want to help you guys, right? And so I told Larry, I says, look, I know how to do it. I know how to do this. But in order for me to do this, I'm gonna have to, I need a way to get around the optics of fee. Because when people come to fee.org or they come to these workshops at the level of optics, they see what's going on and they say, this isn't for me. And if there's any white person watching this and they're thinking, oh, how could somebody say that? Why do things have to be about optics and the optics of color? Well, I'll give you an example perhaps you can relate to. Let's say you were at the cinema getting ready to watch a movie that you liked. And then all of a sudden a trailer comes on of Martin Lawrence running around with a wig on, like, baby, it's Big Mama's house. When you see that trailer, do you think that's for you or do you think that's probably for somebody else? Right? Sometimes we look at the optics of a thing and we go, I don't know who that's for, but it ain't for me. Right? And so there are a lot of folks who look at these optics and they go, this really ain't for me. And so I created Revolution of One. And that title was inspired by two of my, one of my favorite quotes by Florence Scovel Shinn, who says, one with God is a majority. And another is a mantra that I have preached and lived by, which is, I am not interested in creating a freer society as much as I'm interested in creating people who know how to be free in any kind of society. And I've always believed that the revolution begins with the creative power of the individual, not with our faith in the myth of a great man out there who will come and save us. And I knew that everybody has self-interest and that you can teach economics to anybody if you start with self-interest. And I never believed that economics was primarily or solely about policy. I believe that economics was about everything. It was about man's effort to negotiate with scarcity. It was about creating value. It was about understanding the nature of reality and the incentives that dictate how we make choices. And that can be
Mises, preach. Preach, Mises.
Come on, man. It's about human action, baby.
Yeah.
And so I came on, created my own programming, and there was some skepticism. There was some caution, like, many have tried, most have failed. But Larry Reed believed, and I got to give Larry Reed props for that. He believed. And he gave me a long leash, And I would say I struggled early on. I'm trying to figure a lot of things out, struggled. Then 2020 happened. And all of the programming kind of shut down. The world went silent. And this was my moment. I would have never asked for it. I didn't anticipate it. But I give credit to the Holy Spirit here, because when COVID happened, I looked at all of these teachers who are now in a position where they have to create these online experiences at school and they don't know what they're doing. And that's exactly what I had just got through doing at Praxis. And I just went online. I was just going on Facebook and Twitter and saying, hey, any of you educators dealing with the pressure and the stress of creating online education experiences, I'm going to do some free workshops to help you guys. And I just had people going for it, right? And so I'm starting to do workshops with educators for free. And nobody at fee is really counting this or impressed by this or caring about this, but I'm just doing them, right? But I'm also meeting all these teachers and I'm like, hey, if you want me to come talk to your students about, dealing with the stress, navigating these hard times, they were like, yes, our students really need this. Nobody was bringing me into these schools because they cared about policy or politics, but they were bringing me because they cared about their stress, they cared about their students. And I was using these things as the segue for talking about the economic way of thinking. Because what problem could you possibly solve that isn't directly connected to concepts like trade-offs, opportunity costs, marginal utility, and so on? It's the easiest thing to do. And I ended up doing over 100 workshops in about a 9-month period because there was just such a great demand for it. And like it really began to take off. And then Kamal Olatunji, who was a Praxis participant, we had placed him in an apprenticeship at Fee. He was working with me and he was getting the online thing going. And both of us were struggling out of the gate. But at the same time, the online side is beginning to flourish. And online, we ended up passing up Fee Espanol and becoming the second most active social media asset of Fee. And so we're just crushing it on both angles. And I'm speaking and I'm getting like a 100% return rate. Like, I don't even know what it's like to go somewhere and give a talk and give, like teach people and not be asked to come back, right? Like, so we're just absolutely crushing it and breaking records. The world starts to open back up a little bit. And, I ended up doing a workshop for like 500 people. I ended up getting into a school in New York, 2,000 people, all Black, Hispanic. And I am getting away talking about voluntarism. I'm getting away talking about free markets. I'm getting away with it because people are open to ideas when you're not walking into the room, leading the conversation by making fun of their favorite politician that they have been raised to adore. I will walk into the room and say, I don't care anything about that. I'm not here to try to get you to vote Republican. I don't vote Republican, okay? So that's not what I'm about. But I believe what my philosophy professor and mentor, Tim McGrew, said, Dr. Tim McGrew. He says, when you teach people how to think, you don't have to tell them what to think. I believe that about economic thinking. If you teach people how to think critically, how to think creatively, you don't have to worry about all the other stuff. It can take its course if you put the right roots in them. And I was doing that. Now, we kind of get to how it all went down. Mm-hmm. And the funny thing about this is the president of Zilvanus, who we call Z. I remember him saying to Kamau and I, he says, look, I don't know Black culture, okay? And I'm not going to pretend like me being from Lithuania can walk into these schools and these communities and get the results that you guys are getting. I'm just measuring by the result. And we got the results, and we got the results in spades. There came a time where he resigned. And the reasons why he resigned is between him and Fee. Like, I really don't know. I have speculations, but I won't be speculating out loud. And anytime there's a regime change, there's new leadership that comes in and, things get scrutinized, things get questioned. And there's a, hey, like, is this what's relevant, what's not? And during that interim, Rev 1 was one of those things that had always been successful. Well, not always, but once we got taken off, it was successful outwardly, but it felt very controversial inwardly. The analogy I use is, I don't know if you remember this, Gary, but remember the Fab Five in college basketball? Yeah. How the Fab Five, they introduced that era of like the baggy shorts and like hip hop culture on the basketball
Black shoes.
Yeah, right. Black shoes. And the fans loved the Fab Five. The people watching the TV loved the Fab Five. It was so exciting. We saw Chris Webber dunk on Christian Laettner and then talk trash about it. That was so sacrilegious at that time. But we loved it. It was invigorating and exciting. But the NCAA was really uncomfortable. They didn't know what to do with it. It was just odd.
At least Steve Fisher, their coach, is white, and he's the whitest guy on the earth, on planet Earth. So there you go.
Yeah, Fab Five was so uncomfortable. And it felt like that at Fee. It felt like that. It felt like in terms of the numbers, we were getting them. In terms of the impact, we were getting it. In terms of like the teachers and the social media people engaging us, getting it. But on the inside, it just always felt like an awkward fit. And, one of my beliefs is that you can know the essence of a culture by what it celebrates. Yeah. And oftentimes we go to the meetings and it felt like every week we were making history in the sense that like we were doing things that they hadn't seen at Fee before. It's like I go on a Netflix documentary and I fight for them to put Foundation for Economic Education under my name. They're like, well, we don't want to. I'm like, we doing that. We talking about consumerism. I'm making these points about consumerism. We got to have it on that. We get it under there. 40 million views, right? We get things like Harper Hill, sharing our posts or liking our posts. People like Michael Beckwith. People like Taraji P. Henson. People like freaking Khloe Kardashian, dude. People like Royce the 5'9", Eminem's partner. People like Rolo from $1 Million Worth of Game. People send us messages. People like our content. People share our content. And we say these things in like, meetings. And it's like, no one even knows what to do with it. It's just,
Wow.
okay. But no one was crapping on it. It's just that it wasn't the culture there, right? They didn't really quite get it. But then someone would be like, hey, so-and-so had a tweet that was retweeted by Jordan Peterson. Everyone's like, yeah. And you just kind of realize like, man, this might not be the culture within which we can do the thing that we're trying to do here. Mm-hmm. But I had this idea of how I could make it live. I knew that I didn't want to be at Fee forever, and my goal for Rev 1 was to have this thing able to function and scale apart from me. And Kamal and I were working hard on that, and Kamal was doing a tremendous job at it. And we had already brought on 4 young brothers that were teaching, and they were going out there doing the same thing and getting results. Teachers loving them. We were building this brand. We brought on a number of influencers who were just doing their thing for us. And my thought was, look, the only way we're going to do this is I got to get on the development side of things. And I got to start talking with people like Russell Westbrook. I got to start talking with people like Magic Johnson. And even though none of these guys identify as ANCAPs or, any of that kind of stuff, they want to see Black folks succeed. And if I come at them with the vision, I think I can get some people like that to bite. And so I started to make it known that I want to work in development. And I knew that if I could get some of the money to come from people that had our vision, things could be more sustainable. Because the tricky things about nonprofits is that the incentives are tricky because the customer in business is usually the same as the person who pays. And so the person you need to satisfy is the one who pays. In nonprofits, the person you need to satisfy is often different from the person who pays for the work. And so, it's a little different. It's almost like, imagine I'm the director of business development at Walgreens, and every day I see people come into our store, all white people coming into our store. We're doing well. But then I go outside for a smoke and I see that there's a CVS next door and tons of Black people going there and they're spending money. And I'm like, hey, wait, why don't these people come into Walgreens? And then I go look around on the shelf and I go, oh, in the hair care section, there are no Black hair products. Okay, you know what? Let me get some wave grease in this section. Let me get some Afro Sheen, right? And I get some Black hair care products and I put them on the shelf. Then all of a sudden, Black folks start coming into Walgreens, right? And they start spending their money too. It's like, I'm good, right? I'm successful, right? But then the management team calls me in the back and they're like, why do we need hair care products for Black people? Why do we even have to think about it that way? It's like, okay. So nonprofits are a little weird in that way. Yeah. So I'm in this mindset of like, I need to get into development. I need to talk with Magic Johnson, Russell Westbrook, these kind of guys. But during this time of like the leadership change, it just became clear that the fit just wasn't going to work. And they were making it clear that they really didn't want to do Rev 1. And they wanted me to stay on and be in the classroom, but not be in the boardroom, not be a director, affecting things at that organizational level. And that's a great offer for someone that has a different motivation. I never partnered up with Fee because I needed a speaking gig. I didn't partner up with them because I, just was looking for an opportunity to go into a school and have somebody pay me to do it. I had a number of offers along the way that were more lucrative than what Fee could pay me. And they pay me well. I have no complaints about that. But I was there because of the vision for what I could do in terms of impacting the culture. And so Rev 1 was inseparable from my motivation. I didn't want to be there permanently anyway, but I did want to be there long enough to get Rev 1 to be able to live on its own. And so when that was clear that they didn't want to invest in Rev 1 any further, I made the decision. It was an easy decision. Like, all right, I'm going to continue this mission. I'm going to continue my work. I'm going to continue fighting for freedom, but I got to do it outside of this context. And I need to do it in a space where the incentives are right and where the cultural fit is right. That just wasn't the right cultural fit. And so I don't, and we talked earlier about shaming and theories of belief formation. I don't have a theory of belief formation that there was anybody that woke up in the morning and said, I'm going to make things difficult for him. I just think it was the wrong internal audience for the work that I was trying to do. But I also say that with no regrets because um, my goal the entire time was to leverage that infrastructure for the sake of impacting people who at that time I didn't quite have the strategy figured out for how I could get over there to interact with them in the way that I wanted to. And I was able to do that. And I got so many personal emails, so many text messages, and so many DMs. I think about this young brother in Texas that I was working with who went to a car show and talked about how he wants to be an engineer and how he wishes he could be that, but he just knows that that's not possible for him. And when I said, why is that not possible for you? Because his father's never done anything like that. And for somebody like him, he'll probably just never leave the neighborhood that he was born in. And to have the honor of talking to that guy, not talking about him on the radio or on a podcast to people who would be entertained by what I say, but to talk to him in a way that preserved his dignity and legitimately encouraged him and gave him the spirit to fight for himself. More important than breaking records and getting the metrics and hitting the numbers. I know that we're able to change lives, and I'm truly grateful for that. And I want to continue doing that. But I'm just at a point now where I can get into the schools,
Yeah.
and I can work with these people. And so it's important that I partner up with folks who get that and who want that. Last thing, I also think a lot of the DEI stuff that came along made my work harder. I think conservatives, and I don't think FEE would call itself a conservative organization, but I think most of the people that work there or that are in positions of influence are, I would say, functionally conservative. I would say
Are they woke right now?
I don't know. I don't know. But what I would say though is at some point after my work had begun, terms like critical race theory and wokeism became prominent terms, right? And conversations around race got a little bit tricky because it became really difficult to articulate how you can focus on something that is racial without doing it in a way that is equal to being woke, right? Mm-hmm. Without doing it in a way that's arbitrary. And so the effort that I was making to empower young brothers, the effort that I was making to empower people that just would look at this kind of stuff and say, not from me, I think in some ways too, it got a little scary because it felt like, for some people, like, maybe like a DEI initiative,
Yeah, you were empowering brothers everywhere from that kid in Texas all the way to Big Mike Obama. I mean, that was the span. And when that happened, that's when they said, you're out, you're gone. All right, listen, I know Charlie's ready to fire up meanwhile, and I know everyone else is pining for it. But this is the question that's going to lead to our next episode when we're together. And this is the hardest thing going to be the hardest thing for TK. Yes or no? We have an institutional establishment problem in the liberty movement. Yes or no?
Yeah, of course.
Okay. All right, Charlie.
Why would that be hard for
me? What's that?
Why would that be hard?
No, it's just hard for you to say yes or no and then leave it at that.
Oh, because I always love to be like, well, if you think about the assumption upon which the question is based, one might say, how do you define what an institution is?
You got to make distinctions here. And I know I'm a minimalist, but I'm not a minimalist with words. I'm telling you that
much. What's your answer to that question?
Absolutely, but I don't want to. I mean, we got to get to the people segment.
Okay, man.
I mean,
give the people what they want, man.
Yeah, you can't. I mean, we've left them wanting now, and now I can feel the fire and the passion.
How long is this podcast supposed to be?
Usually only an hour, but for you, it's going to be 2 at least. Which I'm happy about.
I guess I'm the opposite of Kamala because I came on here ready for 3 hours.
Oh, by the way, before last thing, did you see she finally came out from the seclusion and the cloister where she was in the cloister of defeat?
Wait, I don't know. I don't even know what you mean. Ran
She
away?
can't.
She hit? I
She's
don't.
been in hiding essentially since her concession speech.
Hmm.
I saw just tonight they released a little video in which she was absolutely hammered. There, I mean, I'm not kidding. Just take a look at the video. It's like a 30-second clip. She is drunk. It is. She's talking about don't let anyone tell you you've lost your power, and she's slurring. I mean, she is all over the place.
Don't you ever let anybody take your power from you. You have the same power that you did before November 5th. And you have the same purpose that you did.
Hey, who do you think would have done better? Michelle Obama? If Michelle Obama ran, do you think she would have done better, about the same, or worse? No mic jokes, just answer the question.
Damn it, you preempted one. Um, would she have done better?
Yeah.
I can't imagine she would do worse. I mean, which I guess where she would certainly do better is that she wouldn't need all of the constant propping up of the media, the constant fearless or flawless campaign she's running and all this stuff. It would be more professional, so you wouldn't need that. But
I mean, this is the problem with adopting an anti-learning disposition, right? Because if you're on that side of things and you believe that Michelle would have done a better job, then that means you have something to improve, right? But if you have nothing to improve, run it back, run it back next time. But we know that you can't do that. I mean, I feel no motivation to arbitrarily bash Kamala or to bash her any more than I would any politician. But I do find it very, very interesting that it seemed to be a pretty uncontroversial proposition amongst all people in politics. At least 6 months ago, that she was one of the least popular vice presidents in history, and that in the primary she didn't do well, that she was the first one to drop out. So there was no sense that, I don't think there's any reason to believe that if they had a primary, she would have came out the winner, you know. Right. And so that's something that can be learned. That's something that can be improved, you know.
Yeah.
That's free advice. If the DNC wants to hire me, I believe so much in critical thinking. I believe so much in the power of learning that I'm happy to help you guys like analyze some of these things objectively in a way that helps you learn. I really mean that.
Yeah, I think if the DNC was to approach you in your neighborhood, they'd be more the guy listening to all the porn than knocking on your door with a job offer. Okay.
Yeah, I'm not asking for a job offer. Don't offer me a job, yo.
Or even advice. Can you see them? Yeah, this is just name your DNC operative. Who's that? Deborah Wasserman Schultz. This is Deborah Wasserman Schultz for Florida, long distance to TK Coleman. What can we do differently? Well, what can you do differently? Well, not. I would say stop trusting the media to pull the most disadvantaged, mentally retarded individual possible operative in politics across the finish line, and just hope that they have enough sway.
Look. We don't need to bash her like that. We don't need to make fun of her. It's not right.
Barack, come to bed. Barack, come to bed.
I think it's this simple. Next time you go on Rogan, and you do the 3 hours.
You do the 3 hours. It wouldn't be the first time you did 3 hours with a man. White man, black man, anything.
If he talks about aliens and dragons, you go there.
There'll be dragons. There'll be dragons for the DNC.
Oh, okay. Sorry, guys. I didn't realize we were 5 hours over. I thought you guys were like Dave Smith.
Speaking of our Rogan podcast, we're gonna blow him away here.
Hey man, if I was on Dave Smith, we'd be just getting started, bro. I thought
that's true.
You guys want to talk about a town full of DNC operatives?
Oh, let's hit it. Let's go.
The people segment.
People segment.
Meanwhile in Oak Park.
We should go to your gay suburb now.
This is Meanwhile in Oak Park. Special guest, TK Coleman.
Ooh.
I am absolutely ecstatic that you guys brought up your parents earlier.
Ah.
Parent arrested at OPRF after a fight that injured a security guard. Two parents were fighting over an issue with their daughters, authorities say.
Oh, wow. Okay.
One parent was arrested Monday morning after they hit an Oak Park and River Forest high school security guard with a lock on a string, authorities said. The intended target was another parent. According to an email Principal Linda Parker sent to parents after the incident, individuals from two families began a verbal altercation inside the school near the Welcome Center, the not so welcome center, at about 7:45 a.m.
Welcome. Here's a lock on a string up your face.
Police said that it appeared the incident was a continuing feud over issues the parents' daughters were having in school. The argument became physical, and members of the school's safety staff intervened. School officials called Oak Park Police for assistance. Police said that as the security guard attempted to break up the fight, one parent swung the lock, missed the other parent, and hit the security guard instead. The guard, who suffered swelling and bruising to the head, was taken to Rush Oak Park Hospital for treatment. The parent with the lock was arrested on felony charges of aggravated battery protected status / aggravated battery public way. Police said that because of the ongoing threat to public safety at the school, the parent is being held for bond court.
You imagine how the investigation went of this? It was Colonel Mustard with the lock on a string in the foyer. It's like Oak Park Clue.
Yeah. Students were safe and rerouted to a different door during morning arrivals, officials said. Quote, I recognize that we live in an age where emotions run high on a variety of topics, and that could leave us feeling exposed and vulnerable, Parker wrote. However, this in no way gives license to anyone to significantly disrupt the learning environment at the high school.
No one's learning at that high school.
She said that she and her staff will, quote, continue to work diligently to cultivate an environment that keeps education at the forefront of our priorities.
Yeah. Are you guys happy that y'all don't have to work at jobs anymore where you have to talk like that?
Uh, I don't think I could handle it. Yeah, it would be
Mm.
painful to, I mean, well, I did work a job like that for a little while,
Right.
14 years, and whew, yeah, it was excruciating. So I'm glad it's over.
I mean, you have to treat every incident as if it's an issue, right? Like there's one person who got out of line, did something egregious that they shouldn't have done. You get rid of that. You deal with that person and move on. But you got to make these statements about we will continue to cultivate an environment in which, like, no, it's a
You got it all wrong, TK. One person coming into the school and throwing a lock and trying to hit someone with a string, a lock on a string, that means that there's something culturally problematic with what's going on as they're attempting to cultivate an environment in which we have to keep education at the forefront.
maybe that person who had the lock thrown at them voted for Trump.
Oh, well, then it's okay. I guess it's not okay that it hit the security guard who most likely voted for Kamala, but the fact that they didn't land, that's the problem.
Man, and hit a cop.
Yeah.
Everything went wrong. Everything went wrong that night. Everybody lost.
Can you imagine that? Let's just assume it's a wife coming home. Yeah, honey, I got a police escort, but they brought me home. What happened? Well, this cop with the combination on his cheek got hit with Sandy's lock that I used to swing at Josie's parents.
Man, imagine you throw a lock at my face because we're arguing and it misses, and it just so happens to hit a police officer.
Guy's got master spelled backwards on his cheek.
And TK, this is something that our YouTube viewers see a lot, but they use the same pictures for different themes.
Oh, yeah.
So every single OPRF safety school incident, they just use the same picture of students outside. It's pretty hilarious. Like there's some good ones that you'll see come up over and over, but they just
What's happening in the picture?
they just recycle. It's just students congregating outside.
It's a drawing of students congregating outside of the
That's great.
school.
That's
Yeah.
great.
Next
It was
one.
like last week's where we were talking about the River Forest tax hike, and we paged to the bottom of the article, and it was all the same picture, just from different years' articles of different tax hikes from each successive year. It's the same picture. Levy goes up 4%. Levy goes up 3%.
Oak Park approves one-time leaf collection credit.
Ay, ay, ay.
After a move to give a one-time credit of $29.04 to participants in the refuse collection program failed in July, Oak Park's Village Board reversed course and approved the credit Thursday. When this item, intended to assuage cost concerns from residents frustrated by the financial impact of the requirement to bag leaves for collection, came before the board over the summer, the motion tied 3-3 with one trustee absent. They sat out game 7. That's crazy. This time, the vote passed 6-1. Trustee Brian Straw was the sole vote against it. Last time, trustees Chibuke and Yia and Ravi Parakat and Straw voted against the one-time credit. The credit is equal to 12 months of the monthly fee residents paid for the LEAF program in 2024, according to village officials. That also equals the cost of about 58 landscape bags. The credit will be applied on customers' first quarterly water bill of 2025. This refund will cost the village $325,248.
All for leaves, man.
Straw stood
About
by
leaves.
his
We're
Straw
talking
stood
about practice.
We talking about what we talk about? We talk about leaves. Leaves. Not rakes, not people, not the people that I would die for. Leaves. We talk about leaves. Come on, man. Leaves. I wake up in the fall and I have to work hard to provide for my family. I have to go buy a rake so I could go outside for what? Leaves. That's what we're talking about. Not a job, right? Like not the customers I have to serve. We talk about leaves.
It's not. It's Oak Park is the only place on earth where the mind never goes on to even fathom the question of who will build the roads. It's who will rake the leaves. I mean, that's their existential dilemma.
Read this total again. How much that
Oh,
expense?
you should have been on a couple.
300,000.
Yeah, TK, you should have been on the episode a couple weeks ago.
So what does he want to do? He says that wait a second.
So they ended. They had a program. I don't remember. Oak Park has a weird thing where they would come up and the village you would just simply rake your leaves into the street, and then they'd come by and pick them all up. So
Okay.
no one ever picked up their leaves. They would just rake them in these gigantic piles in the street. That's how Oak Park operated. Okay. Now, mind you, they got potholes the size of Kansas in most of their roads, but their leaves are picked up for them. Well, they got rid of that leaf picking up program by vote. And now from what I can ascertain here is that they're just saying, since there was a tax that was placed for the program, now they're refunding the taxpayers.
Because they're no longer getting
They're
that.
no longer picking it up. Right.
And it sounds like he's saying we are giving $29 back primarily to single family homeowners. He said, citing
Okay.
equity concerns. I
I'll
don't
get
think.
to-
I'm sorry.
Straw stood by his previous stance that a return largely benefiting single-family homeowners is regressive. He said he'd rather direct those funds to individuals with a financial or physical need who are struggling with the new leaf collection program. Quote, "We are giving $29 back primarily to single-family homeowners," he said, citing equity concerns. "I don't think that this is the best use of these funds. There are a lot of things that I would rather do with this money." Parakat Ravi said he did have reservations before about the credit, but he's since heard from many residents who are struggling and flipped his vote.
$29 is going to be the solution.
Quote, "I will support this just to make a small difference in a lot of people who have expressed their frustration," he said. And Yia did not say at the meeting Thursday why he flipped his vote. Residents don't have to bag their leaves if they don't want them collected either. They can mulch the leaves or compost them too. Public Works Director Rob Sproul also said residents can purchase landscaping bags at local Ace Hardware stores with coupons available on the village website. Free bags are available at Village Hall and the Public Works Department. An assistance program for residents with financial constraints is available too, along with a volunteer program of leaf baggers such as Cub Scouts in Oak Park and River Forest High School students. It is such, that's the end of the article. It is such a mockery these people pull off. And we're going to get to the final article where they're talking about raising the property taxes.
Ah,
It is such a mockery what these people pull off for $29 in leaves. I think they're just trying to see what they can get away with at this point.
pushing buttons.
Yeah. They're bringing Gary, they're bringing the Cub Scouts into it.
Yeah.
Let's hear it.
There's your service project. Go rake leaves.
I wonder why the one guy didn't say why he flipped his vote.
Yeah. As if that's gonna be the scandal that erupts that'll end his political aspirations.
Hey, he might hate leaves and don't want anybody to
Yeah,
know.
right. Yeah. Or he secretly burns the leaves, which of course is toxic to the environment. He doesn't want anyone to know.
Last one. Oak Park is likely to see slight increase in property taxes.
It's always slight. It's always slight.
Trustees indicated support of raising the tax levy by about 3% overall. Despite the possibility of a slight increase in property taxes in 2025, no Oak Park residents spoke or submitted comments for the public hearing regarding the proposed tax levy Tuesday. Higher taxes and no complaints? It's unclear whether that's due to public buy-in of a tax levy increase, a lack of awareness of the hearing, or something else entirely.
There's the deep analysis we expect from the Wednesday Journal.
Yeah.
Who knows? We didn't think of asking anyone. I mean, why ask anyone?
We've identified the three possibilities.
It could be a problem. It might not be a problem. Or no one knows that it could be
Hey
a
man,
problem.
people might actually want a tax levy. This might be an answer to their prayers.
Yeah.
For what we know.
Because all the evidence supports that people have been lining up at Village Hall to increase their taxes.
If trustees approve the proposed total tax levy increase of about 3% for the next year, including an increase of 3.5% for the corporate levy, Interim Chief Financial Officer Donna Gayden estimated the increase in property taxes will be about $48 per household. The board is considering a gradual increase over the next few years rather than a dramatic increase. That's to help make up for when the levy increase was zero in 2023. Because the levy increase was zero that year, the village gets $1 million less in revenue each subsequent year, Gayden previously told the board. The tax levy helps the village fund its general operations, debt service payments, and contributions to the police and fire pensions, according to village officials. Gayden explained that the village is not losing any services right now because of when the levy was zero. But if the levy doesn't increase and debt goes up too, trustees might have to pull funds from the fund balance, raise fees, or increase the levy even more. She recommends increasing the levy in small amounts over time to even that $1 million loss out.
When the levy breaks, the DEI programs go away. Dun, 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 dun.
Quote, in 2-3 years, we're going to be at a point where we will either have to levy a lot more in order to maintain the level of service that we have, or we can make incremental small increases over the next 2 or 3 years, Trustee Corey Wesley said, adding that he does not want to see any decrease in village services.
God forbid.
And debt will likely go up in the next few years as the village works to fund its plan to remodel Village Hall and build a police station. Here's this one, TK. An endeavor last estimated to cost between $132 million and $138.3 million.
Look at his face.
Where does that budget come from?
Oh, ad valorem and levy taxes
In grants.
and grants. Yeah.
Dang.
Telling you.
Another reason small increases over time are preferable to a large increase is because many residents live on a fixed income, Gaten pointed out. If a tax levy increases or decreases quickly and drastically from year to year, it can be difficult for individuals or families trying to stick to a budget.
How would it be difficult if it decreased?
It's a public hearing is required when a tax levy increase is 5% or more. Oak Park's proposed increase isn't that high, but the village held a quote, truth in taxation hearing anyway for transparency, truth in taxation. But no public commenters spoke at the meeting. The proposed levy increase is also due to increases in the police pension of $294,832 and the fire pension of $357,330 and in debt services of $664,082. The proposed tax levy increase is expected to cover additional 2025 budget expenses, Gaten said. That includes items added back to the capital improvement plan, such as traffic signal retiming efforts and the addition of a left turn signal at Garfield and Oak Park Avenues, as well as community-focused initiatives proposed by the Oak Park River Forest Chamber of Commerce. A majority of trustees were in favor of raising the tax levy slowly and therefore gradually increasing the impact on residents' taxes, rather than needing a big increase later that could shock local taxpayers. The village board is expected to approve a final budget at its December 3rd meeting.
That was
the people segment.
Meanwhile in Oak Park.
What would have happened if I'd gone for it and just said, no, I'm gay?
Look at he's tempted. He's tempted to move back, and him and Shelly could just get a nice apartment and pay all those taxes in Oak Park.
Don't have to worry about breaking leaves.
You'd be the one out there. Look at this schmo raking the leaves. Oh man. So thank you for joining us. This has been great. I've had a blast. Time flew by. That's going to be our longest episode by far, but it was all enjoyable.
Maybe will start the revolution here where you guys start doing 2-3 hours.
Instead of revolution of one, it'll be 11 revolution of 3 hours.
Hey man, when you gonna have Dave Smith on here?
You know, I have to get Robbie on first. I feel like that has to, and thanks for ruining the next guest, but that's cool. He just wanted to one up. He wanted to one up Robbie Bernstein. He's like, I'm gonna ask him about Dave Smith because I'm gonna take the thunder away. Sure, Robbie, I heard is coming on, but screw it. The past we have left behind. Right? Charlie, what do we say about Trinitine Brewing, huh? How about the Forbes? Forbes magazine has a feature on our sponsor.
They made it to Forbes. There it is.
Wow.
I drank the Quartermaster Jerry Blonde Ale, which is delicious. Go get yourself some Trinitine Brew. Soon enough, it's in Wisconsin now, but soon enough across the nation. Just like TK Coleman, okay? He's already across the nation. We need greater access for Trinitine Brew.
Thanks again, TK. Happy Thanksgiving, everyone.
Yeah, happy Thanksgiving. Love you, buddy. God bless.